We can't tell you how frustrating it was for us to upload our podcast when we first got started. The websites were clunky, we had data limits, and it was all so confusing. That is, until we found Zencastr. Zencastr is an online platform built for podcasters to not only upload their podcasts, track their listeners, connect their audience, and so much more. Zencastr plans have no upload or download limits, so your cost won't grow as you do. Embed their player that automatically updates to show the latest episode of your show. Zencastr lets you see your podcast downloads along with your traffic, website, and Google Analytics. Zencastr also supports multiple podcasts under one account. The best part is, if you already have a podcast on another platform, you can switch to Zencastr with a one-click importer, all free of charge. So what are you waiting for? Head over to howtomakeapodcast.co/Zencastr to start saving time and money with your podcast today. Hello and welcome to How to Make a Podcast. My name is Nick Miller. I am joined again by my good buddy, Mr. John Bunn. If you're watching this on YouTube or on Facebook, you can see that we are in the same setup that we were for last week's episode. That's because we are together. We are in Wichita, Kansas. We've had this great idea of just batch recording a bunch of episodes so that we could work on some other stuff, to really further the How to Make a Podcast experience and all that kind of stuff. We're planning, we're very excited, but we are happy to be here today. But before we talk about our episode today, John, how are you doing?
I'm great. I had biscuits and gravy this morning over breakfast with you. It was a romantic endeavor. I enjoyed your time, the coffee. It's chilly here. It's, December. We're at the end of the year. I like this time of year a lot. I mean, 2020, if we're honest, was kind of a dumpster fire, and it was difficult for a lot of us.
Yes.
But what we gained out of this year was so awesome. And the silver lining of this year, we wouldn't have started How to Make a Podcast if COVID wouldn't have hit. We wouldn't have, met so many of you. We wouldn't have launched our podcast blueprint course. And so there's some silver linings that go along with it. And we also just are these glass half full kind of guys.
A little bit. Yep.
A little bit. We last week did our week of giving. That was such a fun time to give back to our community. We can't thank you enough. And in our other podcast, How to Film Weddings, last year, we did a year in review, kind of looking back at the year, kind of seeing where we had come from. And we recommend you do this for you and your podcast or your business, whatever it is, where you look back and you see how far you've come. And it's so cool. We were listening to the 2019 episode of How to Film Weddings review and see where everything was. We went through some of our numbers of downloads or, how many episodes of our podcast we had done. And so it's super motivational for us, but people are telling us how motivational it is for them. So this episode today, we're going to be doing a year in review, and we recommend that you start keeping track of your numbers, your data, so you can look back and say, okay, what did I accomplish this year? Even if you haven't tracked one thing this year, go back today and say, okay, what did I accomplish with my podcast? When did I start it? Or how many episodes did I do? And start to really be able to then look back and say, whoa, I've really made it a long way up this mountain.
And one thing that we want to really stress at the beginning of this is we're not trying to flex. We're not trying to show off. We're not trying to say, hey, look at us. Look how awesome we are. We got all these downloads. We did all this stuff. Like that's not our goal. And that's not our purpose with this episode. The thing that is said a lot in the creative field, the creative world, is that comparison is the thief of joy. And so your podcast might not be where ours is, and that's okay, because your podcast is different. And so the thing that you don't want to do is listen to some of these numbers that we're going to spit off and be like, oh man, I only had 100 downloads in the whole year. Like I suck at this or whatever. Like it's easy to think like that, but we don't want you to do that. We are just doing this one for ourselves as kind of a record to see in 1 year where we have been, but also we can look back and know that in June, all of these numbers were zero. Mm-hmm. All of these numbers were zero. And so here we are 6 months later, and what are those numbers? And then we will refer back to that. So again, we are doing this as an encouragement to you. And we want you to record your numbers so that you can look back and compare yourself to yourself, because ultimately that's the only thing that you should compare yourself to is your podcast from 6 months ago, from a year ago. So don't take our numbers as an encouragement of what we have done because we have put in the hard work, not a discouraging thing.
Yeah, comparison is the thief of joy. And, even with How to Make a Podcast, it's like with our numbers, if I compare it to How to Film Weddings, I get discouraged a little bit because I'm like, oh, well, it doesn't, in 1 month of How to Film Weddings, we get more downloads than we've had in the entire How to Make a Podcast, but it builds on top of itself. It grows. Every single month the numbers are up. There's more of you listening, more of you subscribing, more of you, digesting the content and telling us about it. And so we know it's growing and it's healthy for sure. So, looking at the year in review, we did decide to do this episode or do this podcast due to COVID, to start this channel. And that was somewhere around April.
March, April.
March things shut down. We started talking about it, but really in April, we really started going. Really started working on it. I started writing the podcast blueprint course while Nick was building and designing graphics and motion graphics and the branding. And we kind of, decided, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to go for it. It's going to be a lot of work. Are you sure you want to do it? And we did it. And so that started in March, April. We started building the brand, designing the graphics and recording. And in April, May, and then part of June, we spent all that time starting to build our list, starting to, we recorded and edited the entire podcast blueprint course and started really putting together ideas for the podcast. And so officially, we launched the podcast in June, followed up by the next month with launching the podcast blueprint in July. So that's where we started.
Yeah. A few things that, as we were talking about this, we definitely wanted to do the course. And we had thought about how it would be cool to have some kind of supplemental information in there that turned into our podcast, but we really wanted, the podcast blueprint course. And so we went back and forth a lot about how are we going to market this? How are we going to, put this together? And we decided to use the How to Film Weddings model because it worked so well for us. So instead of, having the podcast blueprint podcast, we decided to go in the other direction, which was the How to Make a Podcast, and then have the podcast blueprint be kind of under that umbrella, which is exactly what we did with How to Film Weddings. We have How to Film Weddings, and then our course is the Complete Wedding Videography course. And so it was really fun in that branding and design, stage, because we started with the podcast blueprint and I had some stuff and I definitely wanted to play on that blueprint theme and blueprint idea. But then we were like, well, we need something more. So I actually got to do it twice. We came up with the How to Make a Podcast logo, and it's the colors are very intentional. The one thing that I think is really neat is kind of it looks like stairs, are doing that. And so the idea of going up, walking up, or that foundation building, that was kind of one of the prime ideas of How to Make a Podcast in that logo. So it was really cool just putting all of that together. And again, silver lining with this year, if it weren't for COVID and the world shutting down, we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do this. We still would have done it. We know that we would have done it, but it definitely would have taken us at least a year more of time because our energies would have been stretched at other places. So,
and due to podcasting and the success of How to Film Weddings, revenue was there. We weren't stressing about our jobs. We weren't stressing about making money. Our course launch in February did really well. We were able to write ourselves really big checks.
That was neat.
That was very neat. And, it has helped thousands and thousands of people now. And that's why we do what we do. But we were able, because of podcasting, to then cash in on 3 months of time where we would have had to be, going on unemployment or figuring out something. And we were able to generate and create something that now is creating even more revenue. And that's what we want for you and your podcast, is to help you. If we can show you how to create money and create impact, that could change your life. And so that's what we really hope to do, and with the entire podcast itself. And so what we're going to do after break, we're going to talk about the numbers of the year. We're going to talk about how many downloads we have, a bunch of good stuff coming up right after this.
If you have a pulse, you probably hate the subject of taxes and running the bookkeeping portion of your business. But like it or not, if you want to be a successful podcaster, you are going to have to pay attention to your numbers. But don't worry, we have the answer for you, Core Financial. Our friends over at Core Financial have taken the pressure off of us so we can focus on what we love doing most, running our podcast. They take care of all of our taxes, monthly bookkeeping, financial plans, and make sure we take full advantage of all of the tax benefits we qualify for. It just feels good knowing we aren't going to get a big surprise during tax season. If you are serious about building a business with your podcast, head on over to howtomakeapodcast.co/core to see what they can do for you.
So you've got everything you need for your podcast. You've recorded your audio and video. You're so excited. But wait, you don't know how to master the audio or edit the video of your podcast. We know someone who can help. The podcast editors. Picture this. You record both audio and video for your podcast. You upload it to your remote editor, and a few days later, your podcast is ready for you to upload and push to the world. What will you do with your extra time? Connect with sponsors? Grow your Facebook group? Start that project or even course you have dreamed of for months? The possibilities are endless. We are blown away by the podcast editors and love working with them and using their services. They can edit audio, video, or both for your podcast. Don't get stuck trying to do this on your own. Get in touch with the podcast editors today. If you'd like to save 50% off of your first project, head over to howtomakeapodcast.co/the podcast editors.
And we are back from break.
We are
back from break. We're doing our end of the year review. We're talking about how to make a podcast got started, when we started it, all that good stuff. But we wanted to make note of the actual numbers of our podcast.
Yeah, so we launched this podcast in June of this year. On launch day, I think we did 4 episodes of how to make a podcast because we believe that podcasting is one of those things that it's better if you can binge it like right off the bat. And so we had 4 episodes. So we wanted to give people that opportunity to do so. In May or so is whenever we really started the push to build our Facebook group and to build our email list. Now, we have said this before. We will say it again. We weren't in a unique position because of How to Film Weddings. We were able to put money into the marketing for our podcast. And we know that not everybody is in that situation, but we were able to do that. So year to date, as of right now, I think this is episode, we've recorded 28 episodes for the year. So 6 months worth of episodes. We have 28 episodes, which is 28 more than we had 6 months ago.
That's deep.
That is deep. That is deep. So we've recorded, a good 6 months worth of episodes, and we are going to continue doing that in the future. Right now, we are just, 1 episode a week. And I think for this, we are absolutely happy with 1 episode a week. In the future, if we decide that maybe we need to do more, we might do that. But as of right now, we just have that 1 episode a week.
Yeah, and it's been very consistent. There's maybe been 1 or 2 times where we had to push an episode due to some personal conflicts or something like that. But 28 episodes in half of a year. I mean, that's, a little more than 26 weeks, I guess, of doing it. We started with 4, so that makes sense. But so the first number is when we want to look back on this next year at the end of 2020, we'll know how many episodes we've hit at that point, but we're at like 28 episodes. And as of recording, we just are now passing 11,000 total downloads, which in the first 6 months to go from 0 to 11,000, we're super pumped about that. It's interesting because our How to Film Weddings podcast is getting close to 250,000 downloads. I have to always fight and say, oh yeah, this is still really brand new. This is still compounding on top of itself. And so I'm like, oh man, only 11,000. And I'm like, wait, no, these episodes, every time there are hundreds of people, it's growing. And that's something, again, you can't compare to somebody else, even if that somebody else is another podcast you have. So watching those numbers go up every single month and passing 11,000 downloads already has been kind of mind blowing, actually.
Yeah, we're really proud of that, and so we just want to see where we're going to continue to go. So in 6 months, we got about 11,000 downloads. Another thing that we are really proud of and excited about is that our Facebook group, we have 4,578 as of today of recording. So we have over 4,500 people within our Facebook group. This is niched down to podcasters. Like, we think it's really important as you're growing your brand and growing your audience to have a very niched down audience, so that when it comes to going to sponsors and that kind of stuff. So we have 4,500 people within our Facebook group, so that whenever we have daily threads and we're asking questions and we're bringing up stuff, we can reach so many people there.
Yeah, and I love that Facebook group. If you're not a part of it, just search How to Make a Podcast on Facebook and join. This is kind of, for us, our heartbeat, the hub, the water cooler, where we do a lot of things. We have a lot of goals for what we want to do inside of our Facebook group, but it continues to grow and it continues to be healthy. And every time, there's a lot of people joining because of our paid ads, and there's a lot of people joining just because it's organically showing up. But it is a place for us to interact with you, and we are really excited about the growth. To have nearly 5,000 people in that Facebook group in 6 months is kind of mind blowing. Our How to Film Weddings group has 8,000 people, and we've been doing it for 2 years. And so it's obviously, there's more people that podcast than film weddings, but it's really great to see how healthy that is and how much that is growing. An area that I want to get better at, it's not that it's bad, but our Instagram. We are going to spend more time interacting and doing more things over on Instagram, but we are already at 1,075 followers on Instagram. So 1,075 podcasters. Maybe you follow us at How to Make a Podcast. If you don't, come on, give us a follow. I mean, we're going to do some cool stuff over there. But that's grown. I mean, in 6 months ago, we had 0. And now we're at 1,075. I'm so excited to see where it is this time next year. And I think the biggest area for us where I think we're going to grow in 2021 has to be our YouTube.
Yeah.
We just really started, we've never pushed anything on YouTube except for our podcast episodes. We haven't done any gear reviews. We haven't done anything like that. And one of the reasons we're batch recording a bunch of episodes, and that's kind of one of our plans moving forward, is so we can have a lot of episodes recorded, so we can spend more time on YouTube reviews or behind the scenes things, or gear reviews, stuff like that. And so our YouTube channel right now, we have 97 subscribers, which is awesome. I mean, it's just it's a very small number, but our podcasts are getting 10 or 11 views on there, which is it's interesting, and I'm excited to see where it's at this time next year. And there should be no shame in your numbers and where they are and where they're growing and where they're going to.
Everyone, when it comes to numbers, everyone starts at 0. Everyone starts somewhere. And so, yes, there are people that are able to grow really fast, and they blow up, and that happens very, very quickly with them. But that's not most people. Okay. Most people, it's really slow like this. And YouTube is just one of those things for us, because we've just been pushing a podcast and we haven't really been pushing YouTube very much. That's why. And we're okay with that. Obviously we do want to grow that. There's some big, huge benefits in us doing that. But that's where we are today. But the thing that we're really excited about is our email list. So 6 months ago, we had 0 emails on our email list. And as of recording of this, we have 7,956 emails on our email list, almost 8,000 emails. Again, we did spend marketing money to get those things, but it's so important. What's the phrase? What does it say? That one email address equals about $1 a month perpetuity
in perpetuity.
There you go. In perpetuity. So, and that's just kind of a, rough estimate. That's not 100% all the way
but
true.
If you look at the income,
but if you look at the income of what we were making, it's
actually
absolutely
pretty true. Yeah.
Yeah.
The email list is so cool to me. And what's cool about our email list is, one of our strategies for our email list with How to Make a Podcast is, if, we're putting out new episodes of our podcast as soon as a new episode comes out or a new YouTube video comes out, now we have 8,000 people on a list that we can share good content with, not spam you, but say, hey, there's a new video review of this awesome new microphone. You might want to check it out. And that shows YouTube immediately, if we post a video and then we send it to 8,000 people and 500 of you watch it real quick, it tells YouTube in the algorithm, oh, show up to more people, and that will help us grow our audience. And that's what we've done with How to Film Weddings. There's 6,000 or 7,000 people that subscribe over there, and a lot of people, there's 300 to 500 people a week listening to our podcast via YouTube now, and they're finding us from other behind the scenes videos and then realizing we have a podcast and then joining our Facebook group and then buying products or buying courses. And like all of these things work together. Consistent episodes, knowing your numbers on how many downloads you're getting, building a Facebook community, building your Instagram, building your YouTube following, building your email list, and having all those things work together have caused us to already see some pretty significant income from How to Make a Podcast and success and impact. And so we've barely scratched the surface. We are so much further ahead in 6 months than we thought we would be.
Yes.
With our podcast blueprint course, we've released it twice. We have 60 or so students that have purchased it, which is just really cool for us. And we've barely marketed it. And we're adding new things to it. But like we're about to move that into a position, where it's like available more often, and pouring more money into that so more and more people can help grow their podcast, more and more people can monetize. We just feel like we're at the very, very beginning, like have barely scratched the surface of the audience that is out there that want and need to learn about podcasting. And we know that like we had around a 6-month window of time since starting that we've gotten all the kinks figured out. Everything's kind of there. We have a solid foundation. So now when somebody is new and finds How to Make a Podcast, they're like, oh, these guys are legit. Oh, wow, they've done 28 episodes. Oh, wow. And I've said this before. I found The Office in season 3, the middle of season 3. And then I was like, what is this? I love this. The show The Office, and I went back and I found DVDs and watched episodes and have become a fanatic, but they were consistent over time with really good content. And then more and more people kind of filter in and then go back and watch different things or listen or whatever. And that's exactly what we're doing with this podcast. We know, because we've seen it before, that if we're consistent over time, we have success.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, there's our numbers for this year. I'm really excited. In episode in the next couple of weeks, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about some goals setting for both, what you should think about as a podcaster, but also kind of outline, some of our goals for How to Make a Podcast. The spoiler for that is they should kind of scare you. And I'm really excited to talk about some of those things in an upcoming episode, but you'll need to check out that in a week or two. John, it has been great to hang out with you. I'm really excited to look back at this list at the end of 2021 and see, how far we have come with How to Make a Podcast. It's really exciting, really encouraging. You guys, thank you all so much for listening. And until next time, we will see you.
See you.